Hello, everyone. We are in the final stretch of CanMUG 2021. We are delighted to introduce Faisal Shaheen from the City of Toronto, who will be sharing their Maximo journey.
Thank you very much. And thank you, CanMUG, for having me. And thank you for the kind introduction, Kat. This presentation is the third installment for those of you who have been following, perhaps, on what the City of Toronto's journey, especially Toronto Waters, has looked like with preparing to deploy Maximo. I'll talk a little bit about how complicated and how large this journey has been and what we've been doing in the meantime. I know I'm the last presentation, which is between you and your full-on multitasking and catching up with email and whatnot. So I'm not going to attempt to compete with some of the technical functions and features and aspects of presentations past. I'll be speaking more strategically and keeping an eye on the business strategy in deploying Maximo within a landscape of other enterprise solutions. So let's get started. Okay, so I'll talk a little bit about the presentation context and recap a little bit of the history before moving to the solution design timeline. And then after that, I will talk about how we are preparing for implementation. So how we've moved from the core technology platform discussion to one which is more division specific, and then give you a little bit of a peek into many I think should be spending a lot of time on if they haven't already, which is the integration landscape and artifacts which really which really tie the core enterprise solution together with everything else which is on the periphery. And then hopefully I'll try to blow through this rather quickly so we have a little more time for questions and answers. So Toronto Water's operational context, we serve about 3.6 million residents. Obviously, that number grows with the number of people who come into the city. I mean, this is, of course, pre-COVID. Now, so many people working from home. We've seen definitely changes in service demand. But we have about easily over $30 billion in infrastructure assets, which are under more regulatory pressure, which we have to maintain. Our facilities run 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. We have a customer care center which manages any incoming calls from the public, as well as institutions, commercial and industrial clients. So we need solutions which are at that level of readiness and functionality, and are up to meet increasing public demand. Toronto Water is obviously rate supported while we report to council. We don't rely on the property tax base, but the revenues that come in have to cover annual operating expenses, which is just north of $1 billion a year, as well as funding capital programs along with reserves. In the case of emergencies and severe climate change and wet weather obviously has something to do with that. No doubt that'll be a topic at a future CanMUG. So what am I going to talk about in this presentation? Just a high-level update on what we've been doing in Toronto Water since the earlier iterations from CanMUG 2017 and 2019. The perspective that I share with you, even though this enterprise project involves several other divisions, which I'll mention shortly, I'm presenting specifically from the perspective of Toronto Water and our operational needs. And basically what I hope to tease out and share with you is how requirements gathered in anticipation of Maximo have been used across parallel projects and have assisted with OCM, how we've been critically assessing design elements and divisional suitability of the Maximo solution, and especially in the last couple of years, we're ensuring that key areas of innovation are enabled by integration and with planned integration with Maximo. And for those of you who may follow the footnotes of media, you may have heard that the City of Toronto recently upgraded and revised its customer service portal. We're now powered by Salesforce rather than the previous sunset solution, Lagin, which was around for about 10 plus years. And that integration with Maximo is obviously something that is planned for, along with GIS, the latest iterations from Esri, a mobile solution, as well as a future asset management solution. So ensuring that integration is really critical, and I'll be spending a little bit of time on that. And then, of course, as I mentioned, making sure we have the architecture and functional design, which is framed by Maximo, front and center. We obviously don't want to bring solutions on board which would not be integratable with Maximo and would be otherwise orphaned. So where have we been? Some of you maybe who have attended previous presentations or not may recall we started this journey several years ago. It started off with as a corporate initiative that we need to come up with an enterprise solution. There were a series of divisional consultations between water, transportation, parks, forestry, rec, and solid waste, basically to determine whether a enterprise work management solution was feasible and move away from all of these legacy solutions and standalone solutions. We had an external consultant report that was presented to council and then gave us the go-ahead to issue an RFPQ for software and then an RFP for implementation. And this was something that I continue to remind and share at presentations. It really helped us because by separating out the software provider and the implementer, we were able to take advantage of the knowledge and the experiences of the implementer specific to cities, public sector, utilities, water and wastewater, and leverage that in making decisions as we move forward. And I'll share some of those in the rest of the presentation. Finally, there was an award given, and for those of you who know, we are planning on using Maximo across the city, and EMA was awarded the contract to do implementation for the city. So that was the front half, which finished a few years back. What we then did was commence on, we set the project up with a series of work packages, A, B, C, D, E, and F. Work package A was basically documenting requirements and validating them against what the solution can do. Work package B, which we just finished, has basically been setting up the core system, setting up common configurations and planned integrations. And there have been 3 components of this, which the separate environments, which of course you can see here. Where we are now is testing out work package B functionality through a pilot. Solid waste management is the division which is going to be going first. Shortly after them will be Parks, Forestry, Recreation, and then Toronto Water and Transportation will follow, hopefully soon after. We've been told probably middle of 2022, possibly end of 2022. So this is where we are in the grand scheme of things, basically on these divisional pilots, and other divisions are getting ready with their own, getting ready for their own implementations. So what have we done kind of strategically in terms of decision making since we started off requirement validation? In Toronto Water, we realized that Maximo, of course, can't do everything, and well, it can do everything. Ms. Douglas is still on the line, I'm sure, but depending on the level of maturity and the nature of your utility and your business, you may find certain levels of sophistication, operational user maturity are best served by more utility-specific, sector-specific solutions. And what we found was is that a contract management solution, a water meter solution, and a mobile solution were probably best suited to go outside of the Maximo ecosystem of solutions. And that happened after our requirements validation exercise. By the time we got to the core solution design, we realized that integration is going to have to be front and center, and there's going to have to be a mix between divisional core integrations, and then what is actually managed by the divisions. So that was something else which was decided upon, along with different protocols for inventory management, how it works with city stores, the core technology solution, as well as by divisions. Now that we are at the work package C, the pilot division, what now is being worked on is design around the pilot, some of the functionality which has come out of work package B in terms of solution design, what has been agreed upon in terms of core functionality, which all divisions will implement, is now leading to divisional readiness workshops and how we set up job plans. And then from that, what would appear in a divisional statement of work. So I'll talk about this shortly, but really where we are now is figuring out, okay, what has been built as part of the core technology solution, what has been agreed upon, which is going to be implemented, what functionality is going to be implemented by all 4 divisions, And then what's left over will have to fall into specific divisional implementations. And that's been part of the divisional readiness workshops and will definitely factor into the divisional SOW. So what have we been doing in Toronto Water since? Well, we've been working quite hard at making sure that subject matter experts are engaged and the business scenarios, process flows, and requirements and functionality and configurations are set up. Now that we know what has been done in Work Package B and it will be piloted in the solid waste management solution, we now know where we need to perhaps work on making things a little more specific and user-friendly. By doing a lot of work on these requirements validation or requirements review, if I can put it that way, because we're a little further along, we're really making sure, everybody, that the solution, that Maximo, can do more than what our legacy solutions have done for us. So in this case, it's an older version of Hansen on the linear side, and it's Avantis on the plant side, which will come in a future phase. But this is where we're really starting with OCM by organizational change management, by getting our operators, our subject matter experts in the field to put input into what their as-is flow, as-be flows are, and map out those processes. It's grinding, it's challenging, and it's difficult, but by bringing these guys in, men and women, of course, by bringing them in early in the process, they can see and sign off on what their understanding is of what they need the solution to do, and then how that translates into the configuration and the software side, which my team takes on with the assistance of the vendor. The benefits of this, of course, is to maintain program and project continuity. We've been at this for a few years. Many people have come and gone. We have retirements on the horizon. Some people who started this journey with us are no longer with the city. They've retired. So detailed documentation by section, by unit, by program service area has allowed us to really insulate ourselves from some of the erosion, the project erosion and memory loss that comes when people leave the project. So continuity at the site level, standardization, transformation, addressing pain points, all of that are benefits that come from the requirement validation and documentation process. And then, of course, on the operational side, ensuring that we have a framework for better information flow and reporting up and down and across the organization, looking at gaps, and then making sure that between sections and units, we're challenging any assumptions. So many, many benefits to documenting your scenarios, documenting your flows, because it allows you then to use these as anchors in your project and your implementation while you worry about the bigger things. And I'll talk about that momentarily. So how have we, just to give you a sense of how much effort goes into this process for divisional engagement, has to do with city staff meeting with the vendor, then the vendor leading a workshop, then coming back to us on what artifacts are generated. We have a technical and business team review it. There's validation among divisional stakeholders, and then finally feedback given to the vendor. So where we are now in terms of solution design is going through this process of taking those initial business scenarios, which went through the core technology review process in Work Package B, and now are being tightened up and made more specific in terms of configuration in readiness for our own divisional implementation. And we'll talk about that in a second. Just to expand on what we've been doing, though, just to add a little bit of context to the core technology versus the divisional readiness progress. In Work Package B, what we had talked about was working with the vendor and looking at shared versus divisional functions within Maximo. We looked at assets, work order status, asset location, hierarchy, work types. We also looked at shared integrations, like one address, how we were going to integrate with 311, GIS, shared services such as finance, accounting, inventory, and such. And then, of course, we mapped out what we knew were going to be divisional integrations. So what we knew were integrations and solutions that weren't going to go away, which would have to be the connections would have to be transferred over to Maximo, and that's everything from inventory, contract management, permits, mobile, health and safety, which I mentioned earlier in the timeline. And then, of course, teasing out what is shared versus divisional reporting. Once that piece was done in work package B, we then realized that, okay, not all divisions can agree on common levels of configuration to meet their needs. Some divisions were a little more mature than others. Some were moving from Excel spreadsheets to a work management system. Others have legacy solutions. So we knew that as we moved into readiness, we were going to have to make sure that we had configuration down. So now that we're in these readiness workshops, we're talking specifically about asset attributes, work order flows, how we're going to set up and design start centers, what reporting is going to look like. And then, of course, materials management, service requests and such. So really trying to now take those early work package A and work package B requirements and really get more into the details around how configuration is going to be set up, so that once we have a contract set up with the consultant, we're able to now move forward and make decisions very quickly, reduce our iterations, reduce our cycle times to getting to a solution which we can sandbox and hopefully launch on a small scale to see how people can use the system, and then build up momentum for a deeper and more broader rollout across the division. So it's this readiness and building up on this documentation, which has been extremely valuable and extremely critical to helping us move forward at the pace we're in, and while waiting for the other divisions to start their pilots, and of course for the consultants' time to free up. Okay. So what are some of the critical solution design artifacts which have come out of work package B and that we're chewing on in preparation for our readiness workshops and our own implementation? It's the implementation roadmap. It's our data management strategy. This piece is obviously big, depending on how much data you want to move over. The sustainment model, who's going to be taking care of the solution and all the sequencing documents. The functional system spec and information system architecture, again, which lays out how integration planning is going to go. The readiness workshops, enterprise-wide versus that which is divisional. What the pilot division's usability results are going to be, and how OCM will have to spill over from that, and then of course our own divisional statement of work. There's a lot I'm sure we could talk about and get into more detail on if we were in person, and hopefully thanks to the efforts of CanMUG and OnTrax, we will meet in person next year. But I just want to focus on one piece of these design artifacts, which is really kind of front and center of our discussions as we move forward. And hanging off of the integration planning discussion are issues around multi-site, getting ready for future phases, and how do you really set up this solution so that you are really in a position where you can move from two legacy solutions to one in a very large and arguably very complex organization. So the integrations that have been in play for the last little while, I just want to give an example of give a timeline now of division specifically where we've been. The enterprise work management system, we expect a go live with Maximo in 2 years time. For the mobile solution, we expect to go live with that in 1 year, and that'll see the sunsetting of Fieldworker. Our enterprise customer relationship management system, which for those of you who may remember from 2017's CanMUG presentation, was supposed to be online after Maximo went live. Well, that has outpaced us and it's lapped us. And, the CTV news release just went out a couple of days ago. So that system is now go live. Customers can populate, can use a self-service portal to basically issue service requests that go to the 311 call center and then are distributed automatically to different operating divisions. So very exciting stuff. It's very mobile friendly and definitely part of the city's digital journey, but that has gone live now. 4 years ago, we didn't plan for that. So some of these moving parts and integrations have posed some challenges and have required us to become agile in the true sense and ensure that we have the right conversations and discussions around configuration integration in place. What's been happening already, the contract management solution has been ongoing for the last 3 years. The thought was that would be absorbed by Maximo, but because of its level of sophistication and real suitability to Toronto Water, we've hung on to it. The document management system has been live for 5 years, as well as the work that Esri's been doing with the city has been ongoing for the last 5 years. So just a few integrations that one needs to kind of keep in mind, and that we've kept in mind and an eye on and planned for, given that we've been able to develop a process around documenting our requirements in a way, and having that journey of documents and their revision and their focusing happen in a sort of predictive and very well thought out manner. That has helped us take time away and then focus on how to manage these integrations. Okay, so just as we wrap up, what are some of this is just a word cloud that really, in terms of requirements, conceptualizes what raw material has been really valuable to us as we move through the SME engagement, requirements gathering and validation journey, and now in the midst of our readiness workshops preparing for our own implementation. Business scenarios and standard operating procedures have been critical to obtain from our operators and from our field units, figuring out what scenario pain points are and what process flow opportunities for improvement are, and making that front and center of all the documentation we've gathered. Of course, then you have job plan templates, asset hierarchy, and data structure, which are hanging off of it, along with everything else which is in a smaller font, which is also important, but not as important as the bigger ticket items. And I'd have to say, and it's a word of caution perhaps to some colleagues who are early on in the journey, and maybe even those who in the enterprise journey are a little further along. Like, what are you focusing on really in terms of documenting and in spending time discussing? Is it just looking at reporting? Is it gathering meeting minutes? Is it looking at cost management, what your communication plan is going to be, KPIs or OCM? Yes, those are important and certainly part and parcel of the journey. But unless you're engaging with the end user and using whatever inputs they could provide you in terms of SOPs, scenario pain points, OFIs, business scenarios, job plan templates, data load sheets, if you're not gathering that and building your requirements on that foundation, OCM and change management is going to be very, very difficult in the weeks and months ahead. So really, what's required is this mating and this coupling of business, end user, and requirements and technology capability. So what are some of the lessons that have been learned? Again, having dedicated resources working on this has been very helpful because it's allowed us to leverage a lot of these artifacts in different areas of integration. For the mobile solution, for the ECRM solution, we've been able to take a lot of this documentation and ensure consistency in our approach and our design decisions. Also, I think what we've reached now at the city is really answering the question of how enterprise are we as a city? How much in the way of assets do we share? How much in the way of reporting is common? Or are we really in need of simply focusing on better integration, more real-time and dynamic integration? And these are all questions, especially in the public sector, that we have to answer if we're concerned with making Web 2.0 a reality and really ensuring that more dynamic co-production, co-creation, and usability of our software solutions, especially public facing as well as internal, are real and dynamic and are getting ready for the next generation. This really has to be a question that we ask, and that should influence our design and how much we put into the enterprise management promise. And then, of course, at least for us, as I'm sure with some colleagues in manufacturing and utility industry, asset criticality and enabling innovation needs to be front and center going forward. It's likely that budgets will be impacted some way by a post-COVID funded reality. Again, this is speculation on my part. For those of you who know, I teach politics at Ryerson University as well, so I'm paid to worry about local government more broadly than just perhaps the utility sector, but we will likely see some reckoning with funding and budgets in the future around post-COVID and how that all plays out. And we're going to definitely need to prioritize what assets, what functionality, what strategies that technology can enable, what will have to be front and center and will have to be given priority, and how will we enable innovation to move forward despite perhaps likely budget pressure and cost pressure in the years ahead. So now is the time to plan and think this stuff through, and good documentation, good requirements gathering, and solution design discussions with end users can certainly help that. In terms of maintaining continuity towards implementation, it's just a graphic I wanted to finish off with. If you have the right conversations at the right time around architecture and requirements, your design discussions become a lot more tighter, and you can look at what Maximo can really do for you, how you build your asset hierarchies around it, common versus divisional, functional system specifications. And then now in getting ready for readiness and getting ready for implementation, we're in a position where we can show requirements to the vendor, the same requirements to our end user, and then come up with realistic screen mock-ups and use cases, which gives our end users a sense of what this product is going to do and how it will be a step ahead and an improvement over what they have used in the past. And that, my friends, is OCM in a nutshell. So I think I've got 4 minutes on the nose that maybe we can spend on questions. Kat, over to you.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Faisal. Shaheen from City of Toronto, everyone. If you have any questions for Faisal, please put them in the questions box, and I'll just give it a minute.
Yeah, while we're waiting, Kat, I just have to offer a little bit of introspection. I mean, it's been about 8 or 9 years since we started this journey of enterprise solution development here in the city. And the city is big and complex. But one thing I'd have to say is that, good documentation and organizational change management, it really starts at the beginning of any project. If you're not getting the end users involved early on, you can have tick boxes of OCM and accessibility and user testing later on, but it's not really going to be real. It's not going to be part of the organizational wisdom or the culture of change that we're trying to instill in our organizations, leading organizations. You have to get these end users involved very early on. And I know with CanMUG and PMAC and some of the spaces that I present within, I'm singing to the choir here, but documentation does help you do that. And it can be onerous, sometimes taxing, but it is really the scaffolding that we build the rest of our project expectations on.
Thank you very, very much, Faisal.